Who are you? I'm Maria. Will you play with me? No, you're hurting me! No!
In 1931, a movie showed a corpse brought back to life, unleashing existential terror, scientific blasphemy, and the birth of the monster movie. Frankenstein was more than a film. It was a cultural earthquake that forever changed what horror could be. And today, we'll reveal 20 shocking secrets about the film that created Hollywood's most iconic monster. Number 1. The most iconic moments in cinema. Let's start with the scene that changed everything. Lightning crashes, electrical coils buzz and spark. Colin Clive, playing the obsessed Dr. Frankenstein, watches his creation's hand begin to move. And then he screams those 3 words that would echo through nearly a century of cinema.
It's alive! Oh, it's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Here's the thing. This moment, this absolutely legendary piece of film history, doesn't actually exist in Mary Shelley's original 1818 novel. In the original novel, Victor Frankenstein is horrified by his creation the moment it opens its eyes. He runs away in disgust. There's no triumphant declaration. But screenwriters Francis Edward Farrago and Garrett Fort understood something crucial. Audiences needed that moment of twisted joy before the horror set in. They needed to see Frankenstein's pride before his fall. And director James Whale knew exactly how to stage it, with Clive's voice rising to near hysteria, his eyes wild with scientific ecstasy. The scene was shot with actual electrical equipment from Kenneth Strickfaden, creating real sparks and genuine danger on set. Colin Clive's performance was so intense that Universal executives worried it was too over the top. But audiences, they ate it up. That single scene defined what a mad scientist looked like for generations. Number 2, Boris Karloff wasn't the first choice. The man who would become synonymous with Frankenstein's monster, the actor whose silhouette is still instantly recognizable nearly a century later, was actually Universal's backup plan. The studio's first choice? Bela Lugosi. Fresh off his star-making turn as Dracula earlier that same year, Universal executives figured they had lightning in a bottle. Why not use their proven horror star twice in 1 year? Lugosi even did makeup tests. But Lugosi rejected the role. He called it a part for a half-wit giant. Lugosi was a classically trained stage actor who'd played Shakespearean roles in Budapest. The monster, as originally written, had no dialogue, just grunts. Just shambling around in heavy makeup where nobody could see your face. To Lugosi, this wasn't acting, it was stunt work. The irony? Lugosi's career would eventually circle back to horror B-movies and poverty, while Karloff became one of the most beloved character actors in Hollywood history, all because Lugosi thought the role was beneath him. Number 3, a makeup genius designed the monster. Jack Pierce was Universal's chief makeup artist, and he took his job very, very seriously. When Whale told him they needed a creature brought to life from dead body parts, he went full forensic scientist. Pierce actually studied anatomy, surgery, and criminology to figure out how a reanimated corpse assembled by an amateur medical student might realistically look. He theorized that Frankenstein, desperate for a brain, would have sawed open the skull at its easiest access point, straight across the top. Hence, the flat head. The neck bolts? Pierce's innovation. He decided Frankenstein would need conductors to channel electricity directly into the nervous system. The heavy, drooping eyelids? Those represented the relaxed state of a dead face, the greenish-gray skin tone. That's how cadaver flesh looks under certain lighting conditions. Every detail had a pseudo-scientific justification. The square fingernails, the surgical scars crisscrossing the forehead and cheeks. Even the way the monster's temples seemed to bulge slightly, all calculated to suggest a body assembled from mismatched parts. And here's the kicker. Pierce's design was so perfect, so immediately iconic, that it became the definitive image of Frankenstein's monster for the next 90-plus years. Number 4. The makeup took 4 hours every day. Boris Karloff had to arrive on set at 5 in the morning to sit absolutely motionless in a makeup chair for up to 4 hours while Jack Pierce transformed him into the monster. Let me paint the picture. Pierce would start with cotton and collodion, a syrupy solution that dries like rubber cement on skin, to build up Karloff's forehead and create scar tissue, layer after layer, waiting for each to dry. Then came the putty for the flat-top skull, carefully sculpted and blended into the hairline. The eyelids required special latex appliances glued directly onto Karloff's actual eyelids, making them droop and creating that dead-eyed stare. His skin was painted in layers, green-gray foundation, then darker shading in the hollows of his cheeks and eye sockets, then lighter highlights on the bone structure to make him look gaunt and corpse-like under the harsh set lighting. And then the pièce de résistance, a 10-pound metal headpiece that created the flat-top silhouette. 10 pounds of metal pressing down on Karloff's skull, held in place by straps, giving him constant headaches. The removal process, another hour and a half of carefully dissolving adhesives and peeling off latex, often taking some of Karloff's skin with it. His face would be red and raw by the time he left the studio. Number 5. Karloff lost teeth for the role. Here's a detail that'll make you wince. Boris Karloff deliberately removed a dental bridge for this role. Not because Pierce asked him to. Karloff had been missing some teeth for years and wore a dental bridge to fill the gaps. The bridge gave his face a fuller, more normal appearance. Remove it, though, and his cheeks collapsed inward, creating deep shadows and giving his face that sunken, cadaverous look that photographs so hauntingly. So Karloff just took it out, spent the entire shoot without it, speaking around the gaps when he had his few lines. When you watch Karloff's performance, you're not seeing clever makeup tricks and good acting. You're seeing a man who genuinely transformed himself into something other than human. Number 6. The studio censored a line. There's a moment in Frankenstein that cuts to the heart of why this story resonates, the instant where science crosses into blasphemy. Dr. Frankenstein, watching his creature's first signs of life, shouts triumphantly, "In the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God." Universal executives nearly lost their minds when they heard it. Remember, this was 1931, America in the Great Depression, with church attendance still a cornerstone of community life. The production code wouldn't officially control Hollywood content until 1934, but religious groups already wielded massive influence over what could and couldn't appear on screen. So, they censored it. But here's where it gets technically interesting. They didn't reshoot the scene. They simply muted the audio during the God portion of the line. Some prints cut the entire line. Others left it in but turned down the volume so dramatically you could barely hear it. Television broadcasts throughout the 1950s and 1960s consistently removed it entirely. For decades, most Americans watching Frankenstein on late-night TV never heard Frankenstein's ultimate act of hubris. The line wasn't properly restored in most versions until the 1980s, when changing cultural attitudes and home video releases finally allowed audiences to hear what James Whale originally intended. Number 7. The monster nearly spoke in early drafts. Flip through the early script drafts for Frankenstein, and you'll find something shocking. The monster talks. In the original screenplay, he was articulate, philosophical, nearly eloquent, much closer to Mary Shelley's novel, where the creature is self-educated and speaks in elaborate Victorian prose. There's even dialogue written where the monster explains his loneliness. James Whale threw it all out, every word. This wasn't about budget or time constraints. This was a calculated artistic decision. Whale understood something profound. Silence is more frightening than words. A monster that can explain itself becomes sympathetic too quickly. You understand its motivations. You rationalize its actions. The creature becomes less other and more like us. But a silent monster, that's primal fear. You can't reason with it. You can't understand what it wants or what it's thinking. It's unpredictable. The silence forces you to project your own fears onto it, making it whatever terrifies you most. More importantly, and this is where Whale's genius shows, the silence makes the monster tragic without being pitiful. Watch Karloff's performance. Every gesture, every slow turn of his head, every moment where he reaches out to touch something and then pulls back in confusion. He's clearly thinking, clearly feeling, but he can't communicate. He's locked inside his own reanimated corpse, trying to understand a world that screams and runs from him. Number 8. That little girl scene was almost cut forever. If you've seen Frankenstein, you know the scene I'm talking about. If you haven't, prepare yourself. The monster, wandering alone, encounters a young girl named Maria playing by a lake. She's throwing flowers into the water, watching them float. The monster, curious and gentle, sits beside her. She's not afraid. She sees him as just another playmate. They throw flowers together. It's actually a tender moment. The monster is experiencing acceptance for the first time in his brief existence, but then the flowers run out, and in his childlike understanding of the game, the monster picks up Maria and throws her into the water, expecting her to float like the flowers. She doesn't float. She drowns. The monster's confusion as he realizes something's wrong. That's the real horror. He didn't understand. He just wanted to keep playing. Test audiences in 1931 were traumatized, so they cut it. Not just from some prints, from almost every print distributed after the initial theatrical run. Throughout the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, most people who watched Frankenstein saw the monster playing with Maria by the lake. Then a sudden cut to her father carrying her dead body through the village. The actual drowning? Gone. This created an even darker interpretation. Without seeing the innocent mistake, viewers assumed the monster had done something far worse to the little girl. The implied violence became more disturbing than what Whale actually filmed. Number 9. Karloff's back was permanently damaged. Karloff's costume was medically dangerous. A 10-pound metal headpiece strapped to his skull, 15 pounds of padded jacket, and special weighted boots, 5 pounds each, with built-up heels that threw off his balance. 30-plus pounds total, worn 12 to 14 hours daily for weeks. His spine couldn't take it. By the end of filming, Karloff had chronic back pain, actual spinal damage that never healed. He'd play the monster 2 more times, worsening the injury each time. For 3 decades, he needed pain medication and therapy. In his 70s, he couldn't sit through interviews without standing to relieve his spine. Boris Karloff literally sacrificed his body to create cinema's most enduring icon. Number 10. The film was banned in multiple countries. Frankenstein wasn't just controversial, it was considered dangerous. Multiple countries banned it outright, but the reasons tell you everything about 1930s global culture. Ireland banned it on grounds of blasphemy. The Catholic Church held massive influence in Ireland, and the idea of a man creating life through science, playing God, as the censored line stated, was unacceptable. Sweden banned it for being too horrifying for public consumption. Swedish film censors had strict guidelines about violence and psychological disturbance in cinema. Italy, under Mussolini's fascist government, banned it for entirely different reasons. The authorities deemed it morally questionable and potentially subversive. Parts of China banned it. Palestine banned it. Even some regions of Canada refused to screen it. In Massachusetts, local censors demanded cuts to the lake scene and several other moments before allowing its release. Meanwhile, in America, it became a massive hit. That cultural disconnect is fascinating. What one society considers entertainment, another considers corrupting. But the real legacy of Frankenstein wasn't its content. It was what Universal created to bring the monster to life. Number 11. The lab equipment. Kenneth Strickfaden was an electrical effects specialist who built the elaborate equipment for Frankenstein's laboratory. The crackling Jacob's ladders, the spinning Tesla coils, the mysterious glass containers filled with bubbling liquid, the massive knife switches that Dr. Frankenstein throws to channel electricity into his creation. All of it was Strickfaden's invention, and all of it actually worked. Universal didn't just use these props for one movie and throw them away. They kept them, stored them, and rented them out for decades. That exact equipment, Strickfaden's original pieces, appeared in hundreds of films and TV shows throughout the 20th century. Strickfaden himself became the go-to guy for mad scientist labs. He'd show up on set, arrange his equipment, demonstrate how to use it safely, and stand just off camera during filming to make sure nothing exploded. He worked in Hollywood into his 70s, always with his original 1931 equipment. Number 12. The monster's growl was added in post-production. Here's a secret. Most of what you hear isn't Karloff. During filming, he was nearly silent. Just physical acting, expressive gestures, tragic eyes. But test audiences felt the monster was too quiet, too human. Universal brought Karloff back to record growls, roars, and moans that were dubbed in later. Some iconic sounds aren't even him. Sound engineers layered in animal growls, reversed audio, and processed effects. That roar in the burning windmill, enhanced with tiger growls and slowed down human screams. This was cutting edge for 1931. Talkies had only existed 4 years. What they created became a template. If your monster doesn't speak, it must sound inhuman. Every creature feature after followed this formula. Number 13. Boris Karloff earned no on-screen credit. Watch the opening credits. Colin Clive as Henry Frankenstein. Mae Clarke as Elizabeth. And then, the monster, just a question mark. Universal marketed the monster as a mystery. Posters asked, "Who plays the monster?" This created water cooler conversation nationwide. Karloff's name appeared only in the end credits, which most 1931 audiences didn't stay for. He starred in one of the year's biggest hits, and most people had no idea who he was. The mystery deepened Universal's mythology, but nearly robbed Karloff of recognition. Only after audiences demanded to know, who is that actor, did the studio acknowledge him in later advertisements. Number 14. The film's opening warning. Before the opening credits, before you see a single frame of the actual movie, a distinguished-looking gentleman in evening clothes steps forward and addresses the camera directly. This is Edward Van Sloan, who plays Dr. Waldman in the film, breaking the fourth wall in his character.
Mr. Carl Lemley feels it would be a little unkind to present this picture without just a word of friendly warning.
This prologue was added after test screenings when executives realized they'd made something genuinely disturbing. People fainted, walked out, complained they weren't warned. So Lemel turned the problem into marketing. This film is so intense, we must warn you. Like a roller coaster operator saying, extremely dangerous. It doesn't scare people away. It makes them want it more. Number 15. Mary Shelley's name was nearly omitted. Original marketing showed the monster's terrifying face, horror taglines, Universal's logo. Mary Shelley? Maybe in small print, if at all. Hollywood in 1931 wanted prestige from adapting classics, but didn't want to credit authors, especially if it made films seem too intellectual. Horror was for the masses, not English professors. Here's what's egregious. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein at 20 years old in 1818, creating what many consider the first science fiction novel. She pioneered an entire genre while navigating a male-dominated literary world. Universal nearly erased her contribution, the exact sexism Shelley fought her whole life. Modern releases credit her properly, but for decades, one of literature's most important female voices was an afterthought. Number 16. The fire scene was real and dangerous. The climax shows villagers burning a windmill with the monster trapped inside. They actually burned a real full-size windmill with Boris Karloff inside it. Not a miniature, not CGI. A real wooden structure on the Universal backlot, supposedly burning in a controlled manner, except the fires spread faster than expected. The dry wood ignited quickly. Within minutes, the structure was genuinely engulfed. Karloff was at the top in full costume, performing his own stunts. He felt the heat increasing, saw real flames climbing closer, smelled the smoke. Crew members thought they'd have to rescue him. The terror in his movements isn't entirely acting. That's genuine fear. Modern Hollywood would never allow this. But in 1931, you wanted fire, you made fire. Number 17. The movie was shot in only 5 weeks. The entire production of Frankenstein, from first day to wrapped, took just over 5 weeks. 35 days total. Universal wanted to capitalize on Dracula's success earlier that year, so they fast-tracked everything. 4 hours of daily makeup, complex laboratory lighting, crowd scenes, the lake scene with child labor laws, the fire scene, all shot in 5 weeks. James Whale directed with military precision. Karloff delivered despite costume torture. The crew worked 6-day weeks, 12 to 14-hour days. Modern big-budget films shoot for months. The Hobbit trilogy took over 2 years. Frankenstein went from concept to theaters in roughly 10 months total. And Universal was so confident that during those 5 weeks, they made a shocking decision. Number 18. The Bride was planned before the film even premiered. Universal executives loved the dailies so much they started developing Bride of Frankenstein before Frankenstein hit theaters, before knowing if audiences would respond, before box office numbers, before knowing if Karloff's monster would become iconic or forgotten. This was a massive gamble. Greenlighting a sequel before confirming the original's success could have bankrupted a smaller studio. They were right. Frankenstein became one of 1931's highest-grossing films, earning over $12 million, about $250 million today. It played for months, some venues screening it over a year. Bride of Frankenstein arrived in 1935 and is now considered even better. Universal wasn't just betting on a movie, they were building a cinematic universe. Sound familiar? Marvel copied Universal's 1930s playbook. Number 19. Karloff never cashed in on the role. Here's a number that'll anger you, 1 to 25 per week. For 5 weeks, Karloff earned $625 total, about $13,000 today, for creating one of cinema's most iconic characters. The cinematographer made more. Lighting technicians made comparable salaries. Karloff was paid like a day player while his face was plastered on every poster for 90 years. Universal made millions on merchandise, toys, masks, costumes, lunchboxes, comic books. Karloff's contract included no royalties, no profit participation, no merchandising rights. Nothing. When Universal re-released the film in 1938, 1947, and beyond, Karloff didn't see a penny. He suffered permanent physical damage, endured torture in the makeup chair, created a cultural icon, and was compensated less than a modern teenager at retail. His estate still earns nothing from Frankenstein merchandise today. Number 20. It changed horror cinema forever. Before Frankenstein, horror was niche, B-movies, filler content, cheap thrills. After Frankenstein, everything changed. The film proved monsters could be stars, that makeup could create icons as memorable as any leading man. Universal immediately greenlit The Mummy, 1932, The Invisible Man, 1933, Bride of Frankenstein, 1935. The Universal monster era dominated 1930s and 1940s cinema. But more than that, Frankenstein established templates that persist today. The mad scientist, the creation turning on its creator, the tragic monster, the torch-wielding mob. Watch any modern horror film and you'll see its DNA. The Terminator, Edward Scissorhands, even Avengers, Age of Ultron. The film shaped how we think about scientific ethics, creator responsibility, playing God. Every debate about AI, genetic engineering, or cloning echoes Mary Shelley's novel and James Whale's film. 90-plus years later, we're still watching, still frightened, still fascinated. Frankenstein wasn't just a movie, it was a revolution wrapped in bandages and bolts. One film that launched a genre, created an icon, and proved that true horror comes not from monsters, but from the people who create them. If this dive into Hollywood history shocked you, hit that subscribe button, because cinema's past is filled with stories stranger than any screenplay. Thanks for watching, and remember, some monsters are made in laboratories, others are made in editing rooms,